Hello everyone, NWE War Reports here with the third and final update for 19th January 2023 front lines in the Russo-Ukrainian War. In the last update, we ended off talking about the area of Klashivka. We're going to drop down to the Donbass and talk about all the developments from the Donbass. There is claims from the Ukrainian MOD that they have repelled assaults on in or near the town of Vadian. I still haven't moved the lines in this area. Recently, Russia claimed that they had expanded their zone of control near Opitny and captured this northern part of Vadian here. I've left it just to wait for some more confirmation on that fact. So, Ukraine is claiming that they're repelling assaults on the town, which means that they claim that they still occupy the town. So, keep that in mind here. In the most recent claim on this assault here, there was some information floating around on Twitter on it, one of which was stating that Ukraine managed to repel and destroy 7 Russian BMP-1s on it. So that's quite a bit of infantry fighting equipment there, quite a bit of firepower. I mean, it's not seeing the 7 T-72s, but all those IFVs have autocannons and potentially a lot of infantry along with them. So if that story holds true, then that's a pretty significant assault that they've repelled here in the area. And keep in mind that it's also possible that it might not be true that Ukraine is still in this zone of Vadian, but Russia could have been launching an attack, say, across the fields to the next trench line or something, and that's where they lost their vehicles. So, both could be true. One or the other could be true. Neither could be true. We don't really know. This is just really rumor coming from the front line at this point. There is, however, drone footage that does confirm Ukrainian control of the town of Novelski, which is south here of Pervomaisk and in the Pesky area. So if you'll remember yesterday, we talked about the Russians trying to push in this area, Novelski being an important point for artillery for the Ukrainian side that's targeting Russian rear areas in Donetsk. So, there were some rumblings that it's possible that Novelski could fall soon to the Russians, but at least as of now, we do have confirmed control of that area for the Ukrainians. Now, further to the south, Ukraine claims that they have repulsed Russian attacks in Marinka, near Zaporizhzhia, and then on the town of Peresko-Kivka. So this is the important one we want to focus on because, as you'll see here, the last frontline update that I had gotten in this area placed the Russian front around here. And it seems like since we have now attacks on Peresko-Kivka, that has significantly expanded the Russian zone of control here. So we will be moving these lines to look something more or less like this here. That I think is probably pretty plausible. I'm not going to say that the Russians are stationed like in the middle of these fields here. They're probably at these tree lines out here trying to advance on the town of Peresko-Kivka. But this is quite a great deal of pressure here. Should the Russians have pretty significant reserves, it might cause the fall of this area in Novomihailovka. As you can see, they're kind of semi-encircled now in some type of way. Now this isn't, also isn't a complete disaster for Ukraine. Obviously, they're going to fall back to secondary positions in Konstantinivka, but it does put the Russians much closer to this primary communications route in between Ugladar and Marinka. So, or at least Ugladar and Konstantinivka. So it's not necessarily a good development, but some people have suggested that the fall of Marinka and Novomihailovka could mean the collapse of this entire corner of the Donbass line. And the more I look at it, the less I'm seeing that, because there is a lot of other towns that can work just as easily as defensive positions. There's the same amount of industry in the entire area, as well as high-rise buildings. So, moving on to the area Ugladar. So yesterday, Russian sources reporting that Ukraine was starting to probe the front line in the area, and they believed that this could be the possible start of an offensive. So we'll keep that in mind here. I'm not exactly sure where this is going on. This is a vulnerable section of the front line for the Russians in terms of, not saying necessarily the Russian forces are weak here, but strategically speaking, this is, if you were to look at the land that Russia controls here, this is all of Russia, and then it snakes up through here. There's a very narrow gap between Zaporizhzhia and Dnipro regions to the Sea of Azov. So in several places in this gap, the Ukrainian side could decide to push, and should they reach the sea, they would completely cut off Crimea from a land bridge. You still have the bridge going through the Kerch Strait, but once the sea is reached, either in Berdyansk or Mariupol or Melitopol, then the Kerch Bridge comes under range of HIMARS missiles. So at that point, the situation would be a disaster for Russia. This is certainly a front line that Ukraine would see the biggest gains, the most bang for their buck in terms of sacrifice and offensives. So we'll keep an eye on the Ugladar direction. In Oreck, on the other hand, we have reports of a Russian offensive that has started. The information is kind of sketchy. It's really unclear. But the claim is that Russia's captured UA positions in or near 4 towns along the front line of contact, and that Ukraine is reportedly transferring reinforcements to deal with the threat and reverse the Russian gains. Just a side note, my personal opinion on this area, the front line is wide open grasslands here. This is the steppe. And it's unlikely that either side has equipped all of the towns in the area with enough troops to hold them, and it's definitely possible that these towns were initially unoccupied when the Russians took them. So, keep that in mind, and we will make adjustments here because the Russian claims... Okay, it doesn't look like we need to make any adjustments here, but the Russian claims the 2 towns that are specifically named are Mala Tokmachka and Mali Sherbiaka. So it could be any of the towns in between this area, even Bielagira here, Novo Vadianlivka, which I highly doubt is unmanned by the Ukrainian side, Novo Andriivka, potentially even Nestorenka. It's possible that we have the positions of the front lines wrong here. Any of these towns in this area, like I said, this is a very wide open area, and it's really hard to tell exactly where the front here is, especially since there hasn't been a lot of activity going on at all. So, basically Russian reconnaissance and force, they moved into not necessarily a couple towns, but defensive positions around a couple towns, and the Ukrainian side is probably looking to counterattack. Now, whether this is the start of a larger offensive on the Russian part, I do not know. It would be advantageous to expand, any bit of expansion they can make in the northern direction here means that's more ground that Ukraine has to take to reach the sea once or if they have the capability to do so. So this isn't, this is a wise place for the Russians to, spend some effort and make some sacrifice here, and a wise place for the Ukrainian side as well. In fact, this has been one of the quietest front lines in the entire war, and it's very surprising that it's stayed that way for nearly a year. So I will keep you guys up to date on this situation if there is any further developments. Alright, so that is it for me on this one. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter, where you can get all of these reports in a text version, so you don't have to sit through the videos. Alright, thanks again. See you next time.